Okay, a deed, general rule. A deed must be what? Lawfully executed and delivered in writing sufficient to satisfy the statute of frauds, and the grantor must have a what? Present intent to transfer. So here's our rule script. A deed must be lawfully executed and delivered in a writing sufficient to satisfy the statute of frauds, and the grantor must have a present intent to transfer. Okay, what do we, then we also need delivery. The deed must be delivered. The deed's delivery means that the grantor has the intent to be immediately bound and release dominion and control over the property. Okay, so our rule script, this is 1, 2, 3. A deed must be, that's right, lawfully executed and delivered in a writing sufficient to satisfy the statute of frauds. 2, the grantor must have a what? Present intent to transfer. And the deed must be delivered, which signifies the grantor's intent to be immediately bound and release. That's right, dominion and control. Okay, let's talk about point 1. Point 1, a deed must be lawfully executed and delivered in a writing sufficient to satisfy the statute of frauds. So we need those words of transfer. We need the names of the parties. We need a description of the property. It has to be a sufficient description. And who signs it? That's right, the grantor, the grantor. So for a deed to be lawfully executed and delivered, the writing has to be signed and sufficient to satisfy the statute of frauds. And that means it has to have 1, the words of transfer, 2, the names of the parties, 3, a description of the party, and it has to be signed by the grantor. Okay, so words, names, description, grantor's signature. Statute of frauds, words of transfer, names of the parties, description of the property, and signed by the grantor. That's point 1. A deed must be lawfully executed and delivered in writing sufficient to satisfy the statute of frauds with words of transfer. 2, names of the parties. 3, description of the property. 4, signed by the grantor. Point 2, easy. The grantor must have a present intent to transfer. One sub-rule here. This happens a lot. The grantor intends for the deed to be delivered after they die. If that is true, then the formalities of a will apply. If the deed is supposed to be delivered after death, then the formalities of a will apply. What are the formalities of will? We need a writing signed by the testator and 2 witnesses, or by whatever statute they're giving you. So the grantor must have a present intent to transfer. That's point 2. And our sub rule is if the deed's supposed to be delivered at some future date, like after death, we need it with the formalities of the will. Okay, point 3. The deed must be delivered because this signifies the grantor's intent to, that's right, be immediately bound and release dominion and control. Okay. What if there's some oral condition? Give this deed to my cousin Ben, but only if. No, oral conditions drop out. They're not valid. Not valid. Any oral conditions on a deed, not valid. Everything has to be in writing. Oral conditions do not invalidate a deed. It's kind of like Battle of the Forms. Oral conditions drop out. Now, there's a rebuttable presumption of delivery, of course, if the grantor hands the grantee the deed. If the grantor retains the deed, there's still a rebuttable presumption of delivery. If the grantor gives to their agent or puts it in escrow, gives it to their lawyer, there's still a rebuttable presumption of delivery. Okay, the deed must be delivered. What happens? Oral conditions drop out. They can give it to the grantee. That's fine. They can retain it, rebuttable presumption of delivery, give it to their agent or to escrow, rebuttable presumption of delivery. And there's one sub rule here. If the grantor retains the right to reclaim the deed, no title transfers. Remember, the deed's delivery signifies the grantor's intent to what? Be immediately bound and release dominion and control. And that is why if they retain the right to reclaim it, there's no title is transferred. Okay, and finally, point 4 of our rule, acceptance is presumed. Acceptance is presumed. If the transfer benefits the grantee as it usually does, acceptance is presumed. Of course, the grantee can refuse to accept, in which case there is no transfer. Okay, here's our whole rule script. Point 1, a deed must be lawfully executed and delivered in writing sufficient to satisfy the statute of frauds. 2, the grantor must have a present intent to transfer. The deed must be delivered, signifying the grantor's intent to be immediately bound and release dominion and control. And finally, acceptance is presumed if the transfer benefits the grantee.